Mic check, mic check. Test 1 2 1 2 1 2. Hey hey 1 2 1 2.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. If everyone doesn't mind finding a seat, we're about to begin. Thank you.
Good morning. Oh, you guys aren't awake yet. Let's try that again. Good morning. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Realtor.com office. I'm Danielle Hale, the Chief Economist for Realtor.com. I'm so happy to be here this morning to be talking about future-proof housing for the next generation. Before we get started, I'd ask that you would please silence your cell phones to make sure that we have an uninterrupted session this morning. And as you do that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We've got Jared Kuhn, the VP of Real Estate and Land Development Sales at Icon Homes. And we've got John Ho, the CEO of Landsea Homes. Jared, why don't you tell us a little bit about your position and why you're excited to be here today?
Yeah, happy to. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. So I've been with Icon a little under a year. My background's actually, I'm a developer by trade. I was an apartment developer for about 20 years. And at Icon, my job is really to interact with developers and builders that want to use our technology. And kind of, I'd love to say my why. You know, as an apartment developer, I really saw the struggle of not getting things done in a resilient way. And we really need to find a way to build better, especially with concrete, more resilient structures. So I decided to join the cause and very excited to be with Icon. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jared. And John, tell us a little bit about Landsea Homes and your role there.
Yeah, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm the CEO of Landsea Homes. I started the company in 2013 in California, buying one piece of land at a time, Northern California, Southern California. We expanded to Arizona and then took the company public in 2021. We now build, in addition to the West Coast markets, here in Texas, Dallas, Austin, Colorado, and Florida as well. One of the things that we recognized very early on is, you know, the way that we've been building homes has been the same way for a long, long, long time. I mean, you see these construction sites. We're out there with 2x4s with guys, you know, nailing the boards together. It's just a very, I would say, traditional method of construction. But you know, this is, you have to, as we think about Terstone as being a public company, how do we build homes, doing it profitably, doing it with growth, and doing it in ways that are affordable in today's environment. So one of the things that we did, and this was actually my master's thesis in grad school, was could we build homes that, for lack of better words, green or sustainable, and could we make money doing it? So one of the things that we really differentiate ourselves by is building what we call high-performance homes. Homes that are differentiated from our peers that have home automation, sustainability, energy efficiency, and healthy lifestyle, which we added post-COVID or during COVID. So there are a lot of elements in there that I think are that they need to meet today's needs of home buyers today, how people choose to live, what they're looking for in a home, and probably more very topical, future-proofing as well. So we're really passionate about that, and we're really passionate about differentiating these homes, being innovative home builders, and really building a home for today's consumer, which is this generation of home buyers, whether it's millennials or the next generation of home buyers in the marketplace.
That's great. Thank you. So I want to set the stage a little bit for future-proof housing. We're talking future-proof, but what do we mean when we say future-proof? You know, we need more housing in this country, and we also need it to be resilient to climate events. We need it to be sustainable. We need it to be affordable. So when I think future-proof, I'm thinking about all of those things. But when we say future-proof, what does that mean to you, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at what's gone on in the last 2 years. We've got Hawaii burned down, Florida blew away, North Carolina blew away, and now LA. And, you know, at our mission at Icon, it's a couple of things, but a huge part of it's resiliency and building better. And so we just have to focus as a country and a world building structures that are going to remain after these natural disasters hit. And so, we're excited with our homes because they withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds. They can withstand a 3-hour fire. They're mold resistant, they're pest resistant. Even if they go through a natural disaster, the home will still be there. The homeowner can return to the home. They'll be able to maintain where they live. And today, sadly, we continue to build back. And I'm in LA right now trying to figure all this out with them. And they want to rebuild the same exact way. And so at Icon, we're like pushing them and trying to get as many groups as we can on our cause, say, hey, let's try to think about this differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, John? What does that mean for you, future-proof housing?
Look, I think there is a clear advantage when it comes to new housing versus existing housing. When you build a new home, you're building it to code. A lot of things, certainly coming from California, a lot of the regulations that we had, sprinkler systems in our homes, building homes that are net zero or zero energy ready, required to put solar on our homes. I mean, there are a lot of things that sometimes can be too much, but there are definitely a lot of advantages to building to the newer code. A lot of existing homes, have been grandfathered in. And as you think about when these homes were built, they were built at a time when there probably wasn't the kind of drastic changes in the climate that we've had in certain regions. And I started my company in California. I live in Orange County. I was evacuated from my home when we had our fires in Orange County a couple of years ago. But I lived in a brand new master plan community on the Irvine Ranch. And when we think about these new housing developments, these master plan communities, it's not just all the things we can be doing with that house, but the thoughtfulness and the planning that goes into these master plan communities, because there are certain setbacks. There are a lot of landscaping requirements, in addition to all the materials and everything that we build to make more durable homes. So in that personal example for me, those wildfires burned all the way to the edge of the master plan community, and none of the homes were touched. And because they had the right setbacks, they were built for that environment in those situations. And we've done a lot of those things when we build these new communities, because newer code and regulations require us to plan for these fires, plan for 100-year floods. So there is a lot of advantages when you build, first of all, with new construction and new housing. In addition to that, I do think that as we think about how designing the homes that we're building today, it really starts with when we buy that piece of land. It has to be in the underwriting. Because if I underwrite that house to be a house that has sustainability, energy efficiency, is durable, can sustain these kind of 200-mile winds, particularly in where we build in Orlando, that's really important, because that helps us. At the end of the day, we have to be profitable, certainly as a public company. So if we can plan on building that in the design phase, we can build it into our purchasing, our costs as well too. We're going to be able to continue doing that on a sustainable basis. I mean, we did 3,000 homes last year. We'd love to build homes that, our hope is to build those homes for not just 10 years, 20 years, but 50 years, 100 years, right? So you do have to think about that, and it can't be an afterthought. It has to be really done at the very beginning in that design place, in the underwriting of that land.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you had that experience, but it I think is incredibly valuable that you can take that experience and use it in your business to think about what this means, to individuals who are going to live in these homes. We talked about fires in various areas and hurricanes and all the different risks. And at Realtor.com, we make risk information available on the site with our partnership with First Street. So we've seen that consumers are interested in this information. Are you seeing more demand from homeowners as it relates to future-proof housing? Is it top of mind? What are you seeing as far as trends go there, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, really a lot lately. So we saw a huge pickup in sales in January, and it was right after the fires. So, and you see in the little moments, like they're asking questions they didn't usually ask. And so this, LA fires, and I didn't see that with Maui. I didn't really see, you never see it with the hurricanes across the country. Like if they're not in a hurricane zone, they're not worried about it. But these fires really made a huge impact. But the other one I'll tell you that's really interesting, I've had a few moments with people talking about mold. And I've had people break down and cry to me because mold deeply affected their family. They had a really bad medical experience. And when they find out our homes are mold resistant, they just didn't know that was even possible. And so it's more than just the fires and the natural disasters. It's the whole product, how the product's off-gas in the home and how the residents are impacted that live in the home. And certainly the conversation is changing.
Yeah, and what about you, John? What do you see as far as consumer demand on future-proof homes?
We have done a lot of surveys of both new home buyers and our existing home buyers and what they really care about. I think energy efficiency is always top of mind. Because energy efficiency, I think, we build primarily entry-level homes or first-time move-up homes, so affordability is really important. So energy efficiency, the things that you do around that helps lower the cost of home ownership. So people don't always think about that at the beginning, but when they own a home, it really starts to hit them because, I mean, if they're particularly in climates, like we build in Phoenix where it gets really hot, right? Not that it doesn't get hot in Dallas or Austin too, but you're running your air conditioning 24/7. So when you build homes that have better insulated, tighter building envelopes, reducing the amount of energy you need to cool or heat that home, that's impactful. So we've received that feedback and they really like that. The other thing that's really top of mind now is water efficiency too. So there's a lot of great technology out there now for water efficiency, whether it's in the master plans that we use for irrigation and recycling, or whether it's just smarter ways to manage your own irrigation and the landscaping of your homes. So we're trying to incorporate that into sort of what we believe is a whole home system, sort of smart home environment. So water efficiency is incredibly important. And then, Jared, on your comment, during COVID, one of the things that we started doing was putting whole home air purification systems in our sales centers because we wanted our employees to be healthy, right? And wanted employees to, while most of our people could, most of the people in the office could work from home, our people that were on the front line, whether they were on the construction side or in the sales offices, we needed to make sure that they were safe and that they felt comfortable coming back to work. So that was really great feedback for us. We started doing that in sales centers. And then because of the great feedback, we just started applying that and speccing our homes as a standard to have whole home air purification systems in them. So every home that Lancy sells, whether ones we're building down here in Kyle and Austin or in Orlando, Florida, in the HVAC system, there's a whole home purification system. So we just think that's something everyone really cares about. I mean, who doesn't want clean, healthy air? Everybody wants that, right? So we just build it into the cost of the house, right, and offer it as a standard.
That's great. And you mentioned that you work with a lot of first-time buyers or like first-time trade-up buyers. Are they coming in demanding this kind of energy efficiency and thinking about affordability from the perspective of the total cost of ownership, or do you have to do a lot of education with them to get them to think about these things?
I think it's evolving, and I think home buyers today that come into our sales centers are more educated than they have ever been. One, because there's so much information out there and it's at their fingertips. So by the time they get to our sales office or talk to a salesperson, they've already made a lot of 90% of their decisions and know exactly what they want. So they are very, I think, well equipped with information. I think it does help us when we provide them some additional, information to think about, whether it's simple things like, hey, this is the HER score for a new home versus existing. Because our biggest competition is not another new home builder. Our biggest competition is existing resale inventory. So when you're comparing a new home versus existing resale, you're really trying to say, hey, this is why there's such an advantage to a new home. And I think providing them information around that, providing information about home automation, we have a partnership with Apple, so all of our homes come, ready to use with that Apple HomeKit, and telling them about, hey, if you if you use it in this certain way, right, and you tie it into your thermostats, you tie it into their security system and all the things and features in your house, it really provides convenience. It provides smart home energy management. It provides a lot of these things. One of the things that we like to offer our home buyers is also personalization. And people can go really, really far with personalization in terms of wanting to make everything in their house automated, right? And but it does cost a lot of money to do that. And they can add that on. But I think educating that home buyer what's available to them, because I think most people know, going back into the home and doing it is really, really hard. But if you can do it at the beginning in the construction phase, building, whether it's the Wi-Fi mesh network or the right conduits or just planning ahead for that, will make that home will last a lot longer and more adaptable to new technologies. So that's an important piece, and I think that's really good information that we can give to the home buyer when they're making some of those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that consumers are demanding this. We know that technology can play a role. How about at Icon Homes, Jared? How are you using technology to help build these future-proof housing?
Yeah, so obviously we 3D print our homes, so we're using large-scale automated printers to print the homes. And what's neat about it is that it's basically all automated. So we can print a home a lot faster and get a home built faster than a traditional home builder. So, we can print, call it a 2,000 square foot home in about 7 days. And then it takes another, 60 to 90 days to do the rest of the home. So we're delivering homes in 4 to 5 months right now. And so if you think about typical home construction where it could be like 8 to 10 months for a production home builder, we're going to be able to deliver units faster to the market. And that's what we need right now. And the quicker we can get homes on the ground, the quicker people can move into the homes. I did want to add one point to the last question. We're seeing a lot of interest from seniors. And, you think about the baby boomer, the whole age group, it's so large, and a lot of them don't want to move into senior housing, right? There's more in-home care now, and technology is going to enable that even more in the future. And they really love, back to the energy efficiency, they're on a fixed income. They want to know what their utility bills are, and we offer a really energy efficient home as well. And so the feedback on that kind of surprised me. And to see, they also love how peaceful the homes are. Our homes are really quiet. If you know anything about sound ratings, our STC ratings, 55, which is crazy compared to wood frame. And they like that peaceful, quiet environment. So it's a wide range. It's not just the new home buyers.
Interesting. And then, so technology, you talked about 3D printing homes. So for builders who aren't applying that 3D printed technology, are there other best practices that they can use to speed up and construction and future-proof housing?
I mean, it's tough. They're at the mercy of labor, and labor continues to evaporate in this country, especially in the Sun Belt region, and it's getting worse. We all know why. And, that labor just continues to go down. The skilled labor is gone. And so we have to find automated ways. And, there's other companies other than Icon, right? This is going to take a collective effort, right? But, we're trying really hard prefabbing other things that aren't printed and having a just-in-time delivery system so that as soon as the walls are printed, we can get the rest of the house built in a really timely manner. And home builders all have to be doing that right now, no matter how they build.
Yeah. So we've talked about the current situation. Consumers are aware of the risks of a changing climate. They're aware of the cost of ownership and thinking about utilities, and they're demanding that homes be built in a more efficient fashion. And you guys are using technology already to do that. Let's talk about the future. What is the future of future-proof housing? Where do you see this going over the next few years? And what role does the infrastructure grid play in that? What do you think, Jared?
Yeah, infrastructure is a problem. I mean, we're weighing down all of our electrical grids with electronic vehicles and now data centers. I mean, that's the quiet kind of thing that's not being talked about enough, is how much power these things suck up. So we really need to see businesses relocate to new areas of the country. That's how we're going to solve this. We need to get out second, third ring around smaller cities, not like Austin, little towns in America. And you're starting to see it, right? Some of these companies, here in Austin, there's obviously a lot going on in Bastrop. And then out in West Texas, in Van Horn, Blue Origin's got a big thing going on with all the space stuff they're doing. And, we're on the phone with them all the time, and they're like, we need housing now. We've got all these employees coming from California. They have nowhere to go. So that's going to help, because those are areas of the country that don't have power constraints yet. And so rather than burden the bigger cities that we have to find ways to incentivize companies and get people more spread out around the country.
But then, as you spread them out, then you have to have the infrastructure in place to do that. And John, you talked about water efficiency as an important consideration. What else are you guys doing to enable building, not just in established cities, but also outside of cities?
Yeah, I think solar, the cost of solar has come down really significantly. And in California, where it's required, every home that we build has it on it already. I think that does kind of go hand in hand with these homes that we build and how are they being built to be more energy efficient. I talked about a couple of things, right? Tighter building envelope, better insulation, and 3D printing is going to help that a lot. But all the other things, the lighting, the HVAC systems, building a net zero home. So the amount of energy that, renewable energy that's required, whether it's solar or thermal or anything that's available out there, just requires less of it. And if we're all living in these homes that are just more highly efficient, because the amount of power it requires, and I hate to go back to why a new home is better, the amount of power it requires to power a new home versus an old home that doesn't have, the same kind of windows, right, or the same kind of doesn't go through the rigorous kind of testing that a new home does in terms of what we call the blow test, how airtight is that home. I think that has a lot to do with it. So I do think some regulation is good. I think that does help us, be better builders, building a better home for this next generation. But then all the things that we do in that home that makes it really convenient, right? And I think homes are not, as much as we like to talk about smart homes, they're not really smart right now. They're just turning on the lights with your app is not really smart because you're still doing it yourself. I think homes, as they move towards, and I really like what, Apple's been more late to the game than some of the other, applications out there, but they probably spend more money than anybody in terms of innovation in that area. And the things that they're doing around automation, I think in the home kit is going to be really incredible. And as I think about it, these are just software applications, right? You have to have the hardware that supports it, right? You have to have the hardware in the home that allows you to control it. But once you do that, there's going to be a lot of automation in that house where it learns how we live, right? It starts making those decisions for us and doing it in a way that puts less pressure on the infrastructure and the grid, reduces the costs, and start introducing more things that make living in that new home more convenient and more comfortable for us. So there are a lot of things out there. Some of them it's pretty far ahead, but I think there are some things that, robotics, things that automation that are in a home that could be installed pretty soon. And I think we have to plan for that, whether it's making sure that that home can support, the hardware that needs to be in that home and can be easily upgradable.
Yeah, that's great. So what I hear is technology is already a factor, but much like we're seeing with the AI revolution, I think we're going to see more of that in the future. You talked about regulation, and we've got a relatively new administration in office. How will future-proof housing be affected by the new administration, and how does the interaction between using technology to get to where we want to go versus using people? What's the trade-off there, and what do you see in the future with regulation or with other legislative policies?
Yeah, I think the thing right now is that we're starting to see is deregulation, and it's a little double-edged sword, the big thing that happened yesterday, but there was an energy efficiency requirement put in by the previous administration that made it mandatory to put very efficient systems in the home, and that's good, but it added $20,000 to $30,000 of cost to every home that's built. And so you need to do it, but maybe you let the home builders decide, or you incentivize them to do it in a way so that the consumer doesn't feel the end price. Because the reality is it's just adding that cost. And it's in apartments, it's in single family homes. So they put a pause on that. There's a 6-month stay HUD announced yesterday. The other thing is they're ramping up, tariffs is the other big topic, right? And so they're announcing that they're going to allow more deforestation in America to get lumber going. It's not great, right? We all love forests, but the reality is that lumber prices could rocket. And we get the majority of our lumber out of Mexico and Canada, and there's high tariffs coming. And if the lumber prices spike back to where they were in COVID, $2,000 a linear foot, it's going to be a problem. Like homes are going to stop being built, apartments are going to stop being built. We're going to have to find other solutions. I mean, that's great for Icon. We use concrete. We like that. But then on the other side, there's steel tariffs, and we use metal reinforcement in our walls. So no one's safe. I think no matter how you look at it, and I've called a lot of my peers in the apartment industry trying to understand what they're going to do and how it's impacting them and what they're thinking. All these major developers or apartments are adding huge contingencies to their budget, to the budgets that don't even pencil now. There's no apartments being built in America. We haven't built apartments for 2 years now, for the most part. It's probably going to be another 2 years, and that was before these tariffs. So it's a scary time with the tariffs, but we just need to see more, partnership with the home builders. And like NAHB is doing a great job. And I mean, I hope they can get a louder voice and they listen. And it seems like this administration is going to. But, people like John, Icon, we need to get in DC with NAHB and really work with them and have them hear what we need to be able to get these homes in more hands.
So it sounds like a mix of opportunities and challenges. What about you, John? Anything you're seeing or excited about or concerned about?
I think there's things that the federal government can do at that level. I mean, top of mind is interest rates. Some stabilization around interest rates would be helpful. Interest rates hit us from both sides, right? It hits us from our cost of capital. It's more expensive than ever for us to borrow money to build the homes. And then it also hits us because our home buyers, most home buyers in this country, and particularly in the entry level and first time move up, they need a mortgage, right? And 30-year fixed mortgage is really important. So we, in order to solve for our home buyers, really solve for a monthly payment for them, right? And everything goes into that, whether it's insurance or energy costs or the mortgage, taxes, and so everything was. But that monthly payment is really important. So that mortgage rate is really important. So I think there's things that certainly that can be done at the federal level for that. I think there's also some things that you can be doing or continue to be doing on the tax credit side. So to get us, builders or 3D contractors or anybody to start investing in some of this technology and not having to pass it on, right? Because we already know that the cost of ownership in this country has probably grown more dramatically in the last couple of years than it has in the last couple of decades. And for example, why we're doing the net zero homes here in Austin is because we want the 45L tax credits. That helps offset our cost of having to put a lot of that, put those additional costs in the home. So I think there's things that certainly can be done at that level. And the other things, I don't know, whether it's immigration, whether it's terrorists, it is a lot of noise. I don't know how or when it's going to affect us. It's not affecting us today on the ground because we've bought a lot of those materials. We've contracted for a lot of that work for the next 6 months to 12 months. But thereafter, we're not sure. We have been through this before, whether it's during COVID or whether it's when the same administration was here a while back, and there were terrorists as well. So our supply chains have become more resilient. They've become more flexible. They have more places they can go to source materials. So I think we do have a lot of confidence and a lot of experience with that now. But at the end of the day, for us, in all the markets that we build, real estate is local. And as much as the federal government would like to do, it's controlled at the local municipality level. And I take California, and I'm not bashing on California for any reason because I'm from there. But it's not like California doesn't have a lot of land. It's a ton of land in California. It's just what's available for you to build on is very limited. The cost of land for us in California is about 40% of the cost of the house, 45% of the cost of the house. Most other parts of the country, it's 23% of the cost of the house. So it's a big difference. And why, when we talk to investors, our average selling price in our shareholders. Is average selling price of our home for us in California is around $800,000 to $900,000. The average selling price for a home anywhere else that we build in the country, same entry level home, is mid $400,000. It's a big difference. But why is it expensive? Well, there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of impact fees. There's a lot of things that cost us, that go into that cost of the house, that make it more expensive. So we moved our headquarters. We moved to Texas a year and a half ago. Very happy to be here. We're building a lot in Austin, building a lot in Dallas, DFW market. We want to build more homes. We think, just as Realtor.com believes, this is very undersupplied. We're undersupplying the market in terms of housing and new housing, particularly, in this kind of market environment. So I think at the local level, there needs to be more support around that. There needs to be more recognition that we need to provide housing, particularly at this entry level segment, and we have to provide more of it. So we need less regulation. We need less costly fees, right, to encourage us to do that and to keep the prices, more at an attainable level.
Yeah, thanks. So you're not the only company I've heard of that's moved to Austin or to Texas lately. For those who don't know, Realtor.com recently made a similar decision. But what I'm hearing is that the government needs to be strategic about regulations, the sticks, and then incentives, the carrots, to really encourage future-proof development, but in a way that doesn't impact builders' ability to build for customers in an affordable fashion, right? Because when we add on those requirements, we do tend to increase costs unless we maybe incentivize them via credits that can offset some of the cost. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about something more fun. I mean, you have talked about mold-proof homes, which is not something that I was actually familiar with before. What other, concepts are part of this future-proof housing idea? We've talked about, energy-efficient homes, fire-resilient homes. What are you excited about in the next 5 to 10 years for future-proof housing?
Yeah, for us, it's the freedom of form with 3D printing, what it offers. We don't have to build a straight wall. And basically every construction technology available on planet Earth to this point in history has required basically to use straight lines. So if you've seen some of our homes, we've got some amazing, incredible designs where we've partnered with really great architects and really tested the boundaries of what's possible. So we did these homes in Marfa. We delivered the first one, and it's all circles. Like, whoever thought they could live in a round home? So I think you're going to see just the world's going to look totally different. I say this a lot internally. Like, I grew up playing SimCity, and like there was a point when you'd play the game and the buildings look totally weird, and you're like, what are these buildings? We're actually there, and it's going to happen. So we're excited at Icon to really push the boundaries on that, but also the automation side and the speed at which homes get built. Like, it's going to be in a real near future. Like our new robot comes out next year, and it looks totally different. It's a big crane, and it looks really cool. You're going to drive by construction jobs and see these massive robots building buildings, and it's not going to be like anything we've ever seen before. And they're going to be going very quick, and they serve great purpose from a resiliency standpoint, energy efficiency standpoint, and a design standpoint. So I'm super excited for that and like getting our technology in the hands of others. And that's our ultimate goal. Like at Icon, our goal is to empower the world of builders to use 3D printed technology. So I think it's just gonna look a lot different than it's looked. And then the last piece I'd say is it's the next generation. So all the kids today are using 3D printers. They've grown up with them already, right? My kids have them. Most kids do. They play them at school. It's a part of their life now, like technology is. And you're going to see, we believe, we're going to see a whole new generation of builders and creators and developers and architects that grow up using this technology. And they're going to think like totally different, not like we think. And that's so exciting, right? And like to be a part of that and try to be helping with that. When I get the college kids that come to Icon, that's probably my favorite day because the enthusiasm, the excitement, the hope is there.
So you're going to get the difference between, say, a digital native and a non-digital native, except with 3D printed homes. I'm also thinking my kids are going to love the robot builders, but I don't know where they're going to hide if there are no corners in the rooms. What about you, John? What are you excited about for the future?
I definitely put my kids in that category of they tinker around with a 3D printer at home and they build that stuff, and absolutely, I think that's extremely exciting, especially if you think about production home building. And we offer only so limited amount of elevations and floor plans, right, in production home building. So it's really, you have a pretty limited menu that you can pick from. So at one point, if the technology is there where you actually get to take that personalization to the next level, because we don't do any structural options. We just can't. It's too hard to change a plan and to get it approved by the local government. So I think that is very exciting to be able to enhance that. And I do believe that if you can build homes that today, if you look at the homes that we try to build, and we're a pretty young company, we've only been around for 10 years, so we don't have any legacy floor plans, we don't have any legacy sort of designs. Every community, we're trying to use the latest designs that are available, latest technology that's available, trying to find the most efficient and more contemporary looking homes that we have. But as we think about, I guess, years ahead and maybe decades ahead, I think people are we're already seeing today, I think people are going to want more utility out of their homes. The home is not just a place that you go to sleep anymore. I mean, the home is where you work, it's where you educate, it's where you work out. I mean, it's everything. It's a lifestyle too. So I think it's more than just a home. It's a whole community. It's making sure that community has all the lifestyle needs that it can offer, right? Whether it's the tracks, right, or the pools, the community pools, or the kids' playrooms, or the gyms, or something. We want to be able to offer that in these, particularly in our master plan communities, right? If we're building 500 homes in a master plan community, we want to make sure that community has that, because that community, those families, they're going to want to have that nearby. And then with the homes, I mean, I like, for me, it's not there yet, but it does. Some of the functions do work pretty well. Like on my phone, right? I'm Apple HomeKit. I have everything on my home that's there. I have my security cameras. I have my lighting. I have my irrigation system. I have garage. Everything is in there. But I have to think about it. I have to, say, hey, I want to open that. I want to turn this off. I really want to see that kind of go to the next level at some point where, we talk about AI, we talk about all these things that could really start thinking, for me, in the mornings and the evenings, or, how we choose to live, all these things, when our kids get home, right? Having all those things set up, and having an assistant there almost helping us in that sense. And I do think one area that is going to be coming, I think, is whether it's in the construction, whether it's robotics, but also in how we live. I think robotics are going to come into the house at some point too. And might not have full-on robots, but there could be, how amazing would it be in the kitchen if you had an extra arm, right? Doing some things for you. I mean, those are things that could be pretty cool, and they're not that far out. I mean, they're talking about that now, and hopefully we'll build a house that allows for that robotic arm to be installed pretty quickly. So I think there are a lot of really cool things that are coming, and I think the technology is there, and more importantly, the cost of technology has come down a lot. So,
yeah, that's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in home building and to think about homes, as you said, not just the places where you live, but it's so central to everything that you do in your lives. And then we're here at South by Southwest. We've got an audience, and we have some time for questions. So we'll get this exchange going. As I understand it, I have some questions here. Here we go. All right. I love it. The idea of hope for future generations to build towards the American dream sometimes feels really unattainable. What's a piece of advice that you would give to future generations to get them to access that American dream?
The question was how to get the fuel?
No, the idea of how next generations can often feel that homeownership or the American dream is out of touch or out of reach. What advice would you give them on how they can attain the American dream?
It's a big question.
It is a big question.
Well, I think my version of the American dream, right, is certainly I was born in China. I came here when I was 4 years old. My version of the American dream is, defined by, I guess, how I define success, which is finding something that I'm really, really good at, doing something that I really love, and being able to share that with everyone else. So for me, I didn't fall into home building. I was in commercial real estate before. I sort of stumbled into what I do now. But man, I feel incredibly passionate about the product and what we're doing now, and particularly for the entry-level home buyer. One thing really stood out to me is when I started Lancy Homes, I would say 70-80% of our home buyer were a first-time home buyer. There's been a dramatic run-up in prices. There's also been a dramatic run-up in interest rates, right? That stat has probably gone down below 50% now. And it's not because we're building an incredibly different home. It's just gotten a lot more expensive. The affordability is really challenged right now. And as we think about how do we help that, how do we provide solutions, right? It has come to, it's dawned on us that we have to be a total solution provider. We have to solve not only for building the actual physical home, but the mortgage payment, the insurance, all these things. We have to deliver a total solution to make sure that is attainable, that whether homeownership may or may not be the dream, but I do think a lot of people want that home because I think real estate historically is where you build your equity. It's been historically one of the best investments. There's tax advantages, and I think most people want to do that. And if you survey people, most people who start a family, that's the first thing they want. They want a home. So I do think that as home builders or our industry as a total think about that, trying to deliver that whole solution is really, really important, which is why we've gotten so involved now in mortgages. I mean, we've never been that involved in thinking about mortgages before, but now when we talk to a home buyer, we're talking about, this is our monthly payment for you. This is how I could solve that monthly payment for you. And it's not from reducing the price, it's from buying down the mortgage rate for you to lock you into a 4% mortgage for 30 years. That's a huge advantage. So I think there are things that we're doing, or industry is doing, to try to encourage or allow for that first-time home buyer to get into that first home. So.
Yeah, I think that mortgage rate buy-down is a really key component. In some of our research, we found that builders are more likely to offer that than among existing sellers. And I think a lot of consumers might not be aware of that as an option to help make homes more affordable. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, I think I would add that there is hope from a technology standpoint. Like, I just think back 10 years ago and there wasn't these advancements and we didn't have any hope. So there is now hope for the next generation, but also it's a little cliche about there's so many ways that we as individuals could get in and impact this crisis. That's why I'm at Icon. There's a crisis in housing and I'm driven by it. And so I left the development, line of work, which was very good to me, but because I wanted to help. And I think that can be whether it's banking or technology with inventing new technology or home building. So there's a lot of ways that we as people can get involved in solving the housing crisis. And when you get involved, you create hope for yourself and others. So you can't just sit back and let it happen. You got to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a question here about outdated building codes and whether those impact your ability to provide innovative homes. Who wants to go first on this question?
It's a tricky one. Yeah, I mean, the building code, from our standpoint, it's interesting, right? Because we do something that's never been done in most jurisdictions, and a big part of what I do is meet with cities and talk to them about it. The building code officials, both state, federal, local, they all need to get involved and get educated, and they need to understand it better, and they need to listen to their partners. But they're starting to. That's the good news. And so we've not had a problem getting any of our homes permitted, right? It's a totally different technology, but it works and they listen. And so I just hope and pray that we see our state and local jurisdictions continue to evolve and improve it, that makes it so we can continue to build, but also build it energy efficient, conscious.
And you talked about wanting to expand that technology to other builders, so it'll be an interesting test of like when you move beyond the areas that you're working in already, how well.
Yeah, we're thinking a lot about that.
What about you, John? Anything to add on that question on building codes?
I just add, you look at a lot of countries around the world. A lot of countries have these uniform building codes, and it's very helpful. It really reduces costs because how I build in one city versus how I build in the next city can be very different based on that local building code or what that city planning department wants from us. And so every home is a custom home now almost. So you got to go back to architects, you got to go back to your engineers, you got to redesign things. That's very costly. And I think, I don't know, this is how we were set up. This is how, this is the country, there's a lot of benefits to that. But there are, those are the things that, if we could have a uniform building code, if we could have some consistency, I think that would be very helpful for both of our organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. You get some experimentation with all the differences, but it can make it really challenging for you guys. We have more questions that we won't be able to get to today, but thank you so much for joining us for this panel. It's been a really great discussion. You're welcome to stick around. We're going to have some time between this session and our next panel, which will be here at 11:30 a.m. We're going to talk about what Texas can teach us about solving America's housing crisis. And then for those of you who are going to be around on Monday, we're going to do a panel called Unlocking Supply, Addressing the Missing 4 Million Homes in America, some of which we've alluded to today about the need to build more. And the mayor of Austin is going to join us at the Thompson Hotel for that session, and that's going to be at 11:30 Central Time as well. So thank you, Jared and John, for being here. And thank you to the audience as well.
Test 1, 2. We'll be starting the next panel in around 3 minutes, so if everyone can start finding their seats. Thanks.
There was crowbar fight the other night at the Family Dollar.
Wow, everybody found their seats, got quiet. We're ready for another panel. I'm excited. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Happy South by. We are here at the Realtor.com office on East 6th Street with another panel for you about what Texas teaches us about solving America's housing crisis. So as you find your seats, we'll let everybody get settled, and please silence your phones so we don't have any distractions during this if you haven't already. Okay, let's get started. My name is Joel Berner. I'm a senior economist here at Realtor.com, and I focus on new construction. To my left are three wonderful panelists, some of the brightest minds in housing policy. We have Felicity Maxwell, Planning Commissioner for Austin and Chair of the Texans for Housing. Felicity, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit further?
Absolutely. So yes, I'm Felicity Maxwell, and I wear several hats. As Joel mentioned, I am currently a City of Austin Planning Commissioner, so get to work on a lot of these issues directly. I am also a board member for Aura, which is our local pro-housing urbanist group here in Austin. We've done a ton of great work over the last couple of years. And then just recently, I became the executive director for Texans for Housing, which works on state level advocacy around affordability and attainability for Texans across the state.
Fabulous. Thank you, Felicity. To her left, we have Natasha Harper-Madison, the chair of the Housing and Planning Committee for Austin and a council member for District 1, the district you are sitting in right now.
Welcome to
Natasha.
D1, everybody. Hi, Natasha Harper-Madison. I'm the proud council member for District 1 right here in Austin, Texas. I'm a born and raised Austinite, so it's with extreme pleasure that I take the opportunity to look around my city and recognize that there are things that my colleagues and I are doing that exist in perpetuity. My great-grandbabies, you know, that's something important information that I obsess about. What will my grandbabies and great-grandbabies call me? And I don't care how big or small I am, it's Big Mama. And so when somebody calls me Big Mama, I want them to look around this city and recognize the things that work, the things that keep us connected, the things that make it accessible and affordable are things that people had to fight hard for. And so when those folks said those nasty things about their Big Mama, she said, you know what, we got to do it anyway because the future is worth it. Thank y'all for being here today.
And last but certainly not least is Sarah Bronin, a professor of law at Cornell University and founder of the Zoning Atlas. Sarah, could you tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing lately?
Sure, and I just want to thank Realtor.com for having us here. My mom's a realtor, so especially happy to be the second generation here involved with this group. And I also went to UT Austin, so I'm very happy to be back here in Austin and to continue to see the city blossom in various ways since I left in 2001. The National Zoning Atlas is a project that aims to digitize, demystify, and expose zoning to everybody. And what we do is we read so far 560,000 pages of zoning codes across the country as we try to work our way through different jurisdictions to untangle what zoning codes say and to put them in an online map. For those who want to follow along, it's at zoningatlas.org. But very happy to be here and to bring that perspective to the conversation.
Fabulous, Sarah, and we're really excited about that work that you're doing to expose how zoning affects our affordability problem across the country. But today we're here in Austin, we're here in Texas, so we're going to talk about every Texan's favorite topic, Texas. Texas is doing really well, growing economically, adding jobs, adding population, and building more affordable homes than the rest of the country. Texas was the #1 state in 2024 for permitted new housing units, accounting for 15% of the total units permitted across the country, despite having just 9% of the country's population. So we see Texas punching well above its weight and doing really great things, but also facing affordability issues. 51% of Texans make less than $75,000 a year, but just 16% of the for-sale housing inventory is affordable to that income level. So there are positive developments in Texas, things going really well, but we still are facing affordability challenges. So let's talk about what's going right and then what we can do in the future to address these affordability issues. So I'd like to ask Felicity, why are people flocking to Texas? What's happening in Texas? What's happening in Austin? And what are the big draws that we see?
Well, I think the phrase that we all might call it is the Texas miracle, which, as some folks know, is basically the sense that we've had this huge uptick in jobs and sort of growth in Texas across energy, technology, you name the industry sector. We've seen some growth in it in Texas, which has been phenomenal. And that also means we've had a lot of people come to Texas to get those jobs, to support those industries, to do that work, which means that our housing market is growing, as Joel is. But of course, we've also had constraints on that because we didn't really have enough supply. And I think in Austin in particular, we had some really dark moments in COVID where we saw those relocations and there just was not enough housing supply and prices went through the roof. So we've seen both the good side of the Texas miracle as well as those challenges. And what we've seen in Austin, I think, has been replayed in different ways across the state, in cities, small towns, you name it. Housing in Texas and that economic miracle, good and bad.
Absolutely. And Natasha, what do you see specifically happening in Austin with regard to economic growth?
Well, I thought I was going to contribute to the panel, but now that Felicity's answered all the questions and solved all our challenges, I don't know what to do. Joel, can you ask me the question again, please?
Yeah, tell me what you're seeing in terms of economic growth in Austin and the developments that are important for growing jobs and growing the housing supply.
Well, you know, the developments are awesome. I think one of the things that draws people to a city like Austin, a dynamic city like Austin, is our innovation. So people who are creative, people who are innovative, and frankly, people who want to live in a town that's growing in a way that makes sense. And that's sort of the beauty and the shame. You know, to your point, you know, the other side of that miracle is the shame. And so the beauty is we get the opportunity to build a city that gets it right. We're already showing you, and people across, you know, folks across the country call the District 1 office, and I recognize that I only represent 46 square miles, just under 100,000 people in the 10th largest city in the nation. Why is anybody from San Jose or Bellingham, Washington giving me a buzz? Because they're thinking along the same lines we are. And that's it. If we're building templates right here in Austin, Texas, with the ingenuity and frankly with the space, I think it's a beautiful thing that we have the space with the body that we work with and the administration that we work with, that there is flexibility around doing it differently. You know, generally speaking, most of the folks in the room, you guys are policy wonks, but generally speaking, for anybody who doesn't know it, land use is dictated by what's called a land development code. Most major municipalities change their land development code every 10 years. My oldest kid is 30. Austin, Texas has a land development code that's older than my oldest kid. And so it doesn't work in so many ways that what we did was, instead of working through a system that frankly just obstructionist policies don't allow the kind of development we need, folks like a Felicity and folks like professionals who understand zoning from the inside out and think about the significance of building, well, not even just building, and hopefully you'll agree with me, but retrofitting a major metropolitan city, which took 30 years too long to get comprehensive transit, and a new land development code that allows for the kind of growth that was inevitable. But that said, instead of getting stuck, what we did was we got creative. And the creativity was piecemealing land development code changes that would allow for more development in the city in a way that transcended political parties. It transcended, Austin is one of the most economically segregated cities in the country. It transcended economics. It just makes sense the way that we're doing things currently. I'd say we got a long way to go, but we're moving in the direction of having the general public be able to speak the same language. I think that's a part of the problem, bringing folks into the conversation when you're having a dialogue about relatively obscure and technical subject matter. Lay people don't want to talk to you about floor to area ratio or impervious cover. They just want to know what works for their neighborhoods. But we're getting there, and I'm optimistic.
That's fantastic. Talking about affordability, Felicity, I'd love to hear more about Austin Affordability Unlocked and what's happening here and in other parts of the state to make housing more affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciated how you started off with the kind of great thing of, we have all these houses in Texas. Unfortunately, they're unaffordable to a lot of median Texans. And so, median income earning Texans. So we have worked really hard in Austin, thanks to great work of the council member and others, to really emphasize not only on that additional supply and changing some of those very outdated rules, but also really emphasizing affordable housing. And one of those key pieces was Affordability Unlocked. And I am by no means the expert. I think the council member could actually speak to it even better. But the idea was essentially that we should loosen all the regulations that we normally have for housing projects related to affordable housing. And that just makes common sense, I think, as the council member said, but it's seen as quite innovative, which is, I think, a little bit maybe sad also. It speaks to how difficult it is to build in this country, that we did something that was basically, hey, if you're doing affordable housing and a certain percentage, you get the constraints that we would normally put on some of these projects are lifted. And that was related to parking and setbacks and a number of things. And that way we could also use our affordable housing bond dollars more efficiently. And I will say in this Austin, we were so lucky, our council and as well as all the community members really support affordable housing and have twice gone out for big bonds and supported that development. But we have to be responsible with those citizens' taxpayer dollars. And the way you do that is making affordable housing very efficient to build, inexpensive, and targeting the right population. And I think I've probably said enough. I'm sure the council member has more to add.
Not a lot, to be honest with you. I think from a technical perspective, Felicity sort of said it all in terms of how, like the practical application of Affordability Unlocked. It makes affordable housing accessible because it incentivizes its development. And that's, I like to start at the start. So even that, right, development, developer, when people hear and say the word, they're thinking the Monopoly man with his monocle, twisting his mustache. Developers build stuff. We're sitting right now in a place that a developer built. And so I think even just changing the language and changing sort of the tenor of the conversation around building stuff and what that means is really critical as we enter into those conversations. But that said, opportunities like Affordability Unlocked, to your point, shouldn't be that innovative. But you know what it tells us? It tells us that it's possible. So if we can do that, what else can we do? And if we can do that, then what else can we do? And so I think at this point, in a lot of ways, when I'm looking at our policy moving forward, it's something that's going to have to go fast, most especially the last 6 weeks of federal policy. Anybody have a little awakening and recognize that how we're talking about the things that we're talking about today in March of 2025 very well could be absolutely pointless in 2 weeks. We might have to pivot so fast and so hard that we have to think about what it actually looks like. And I think I'm going to fast forward to that personally, thinking about what it actually looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natasha and Felicity.
Sure thing.
Now, Sarah, I would love to tap into your expertise on zoning. We've talked about what's happening in Texas. What do you see from a zoning perspective in the state and in the city of Austin?
Yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, so zoning is that sometimes hidden local power that dictates pretty much everything that can be built in places that have zoning. Texas is somewhat unique in that as a state, we've started in the zoning atlas logging the 1,500 jurisdictions in the state of Texas, and we're finding that a large number of them don't have zoning. We're about 56% of the way through the jurisdictions in the state, and about 80% of the population has been published to our map. The fact that Houston, which is where I'm from, it's seventh generation Texan, doesn't have zoning and is the only large American city that doesn't have zoning, I think is really emblematic of Texas's approach, and it's relative to other places that we've logged in the zoning atlas, pretty light on regulation approach. Looking at the 4 big metro areas in Texas, which we have posted to the map fully, that's Houston, DFW, Austin, and San Antonio, we see shorter zoning codes on average and much more permissive allowances for multifamily housing to be built, as well as lower minimum lot sizes. So probably a lot of you in this audience know what that means, but if you don't have a minimum lot size requirement in your zoning code, or if you have a very small, let's say, quarter acre or smaller, that's a good thing, because what it says is that you can build a house on a small lot. That's a good thing for affordability. So overall in Texas, we do see a different approach to land use regulation. I will just say one thing that we are seeing in Texas and lots of other places with lots of rural areas and small towns is actually that in many places, and even frankly in some of the large cities, we don't see a lot of regulatory change. So one of the challenges that we have in the context of zoning and zoning policy is that zoning codes have often stagnated for years and years. Austin is ahead of the curve. It's constantly innovating, and it's done some really amazing things in recent years to try to increase housing affordability. But we see codes that communities have lost. They don't even have them because there's that little amount of building, or they've been adopted so long ago. We've seen codes that are typewritten that the communities refuse to scan in. We've seen codes that are 10 pages long and sort of typewritten paper that are scanned in. So what we see actually across the country, including in Texas, is that there's a wide variety in zoning, and that Texas is a bit ahead of a bit more permissive, I would say, than the national average, which has contributed to its affordability. It is by no means perfect, especially if you look at the DFW region. You see a much smaller percentage of land devoted to multifamily housing. It's 8% in the DFW metro area where multifamily housing is allowed as of right, compared to, we were just pulling up the stats in the break, 24% in Travis County of land allowing for multifamily housing as of right. Again, a lot of that is due to what Austin has done, and again, the differences, I think, are palpable and can be seen on the map.
That's fantastic. Natasha, I'd like to hear about the political realities of implementing zoning reform like this. How do you retrofit a major metropolitan city after 30 years, and how do you get buy-in from the right stakeholders?
Really amazing questions. For what it's worth, I think it's important to start by saying I fully recognize that I won't accomplish it with the year and 7 months that I have left in my term. I'm termed out. And one of the things that I'd like to make certain to do before my time is up here, did you guys know that the city of Austin has zero protocol about succession for council members? There's no book, there's no rules, there's no outline for how to do it, there's no information for what you're supposed to leave behind. So what the council member does when they come in, the first thing they have to do is hire a staff. Then they have to figure out who's who, what's what, all the affinity groups, the churches, the neighborhood associations, the organizations that work in policy, who are the lobbyists, what do they work on, what's the project that's in the queue now, how did we get here in terms of, the chronological order. There's no nada, and it's bananas, because then you get a council member who's gonna spend the first year and a half just getting acclimated, frankly. So my hope is, in large part, a lot of what I leave behind on my way out is just some structure. We need more in the way of what structure should look like from a municipal perspective. And I think moving beyond that, something I'd like to make certain that we take into consideration is that if you don't get, I mean, we call them stakeholders, but it really isn't, substantive in terms of what communities contribute. And if I'm being entirely honest, one of the things I'd like to regulate better moving forward is how do community groups, neighborhood associations, contact teams contribute to the process that is productive and that uses an appropriate amount of finite time of city resources. I think the way we do it now does not work and it's inefficient. I'm on a council in year 6 where I was at City Hall at 4 o'clock in the morning in year 2. Let me tell you what, Kirk Watson hadn't had us out of there beyond 3 p.m. in a year, and I'm here for it. But you know what that tells me? It's possible. So we were arbitrarily in that building, staff in that building, y'all in that building, filming us all night and we into the hours of the morning for no reason. Inefficiency, I think, is one of the biggest waste of our finite resources, and we have to tighten it up in order to dedicate more of those dollars. So the community supporting a $350 million bond for affordable housing, I think it's significant in that it symbolizes our commitment as a community, but the city has to match that commitment. And we keep saying our budget, it dictates who we are as a community. It's our moral document, we say. Well, then we need to put our money where our mouths are. And we have more money than we say we have, but what we have to do is really shake those couch cushions, and some of this stuff is easy. What's the expression? Efficiency is born of function. Let's just make it work. If we make it work, make the systems work, I'll leave you with this. I know I talked over. I'm watching the timer. I'll leave you with this. Here's an idea that I have, and I want y'all to mull it over, and when I pitch it, I want you to come to Chambers and support it. I think incoming council members shouldn't have to have their first task be to hire a staff. How in the hell do you know what you need as a first-time council member, a person who's never worked on the second floor in City Hall? You don't know. I think incoming council members should get a ready-made staff provided by the City of Austin of expert professionals, an admin person, a policy person, a comms person, and something like a chief of staff that'll keep you in the loop around the agenda, and you keep them as long as you need to until you get your staff. Do you know how much time and money? It's the citizens' money that we use training and having the turnover that we have from a staffing perspective with city council members, and it's something we should address, but we can't address it until we have system, structure, and protocol in place for how we minimize that waste of training. Go ahead. My bad.
Efficiency,
Not really. Efficiency. We have finite resources, and they're about to become more scarce. So I think everybody needs to be prepared, not doom and gloom, but let's recognize some opportunities to use our finite resources very wisely.
And I would actually like to jump in on the politics side because I think Councilmember Natasha Harperman, she just deserves so many kudos for being a leader on these issues way before this was popular. As she mentioned, she's in year 6, but literally the sea change we've had in Austin on the political side related to building housing, being more efficient, being thoughtful about how we run our city has just been tremendous. And I know some of y'all are here as visitors and some of you actually live here, but I think you can see it not only because Austin is booming, but because we're trying to do it in a better and more effective way. And I want to really compliment the current council members, but also say that came through advocacy and hard work by a lot of community members who wanted to see the city do things more efficiently and not be in the building at 2 o'clock in the morning and start to actually really address housing and a lot of these other things. And I will say that it's heartening to me when we are held up as an example of how you can fix your housing crisis or certainly do the good work to put more units in the ground, because we did that cohesively, we did that in coalitions, we did that over years, and now we're seeing those benefits. So I think that's the thing too, is that we're talking at the end about efficiency, but that's been a mantra for many years now of trying to get to a better place as a city and as a state. And I think that's what I'm also excited about is the work we're doing in Austin, it bubbles. It bubbles to the city level, to the county level, to the state level, across the country. So, you can make a change in housing and policy and efficiency at city government level that will have an impact much more broadly than you realize.
That's wonderful. Now, Sarah, going back to what you had said about Texas and being more permissive than most places in terms of zoning, could you talk a little bit about other parts of the country that are more restrictive and what kind of outcomes we see there?
Sure. I do just want to draw one thing before I answer that question from your last comments. And when you were talking about, the public being involved and how the public informs your decision making, I think that what's good for government efficiency and local processes is also usually good for housing. And I'll just give one example of that. So I chaired the City of Hartford's Planning and Zoning Commission for 7 years, and we did do a complete overhaul. Our code was 50 years old, and like many post-industrial cities, it was a very, very terrible code, car-oriented. We did a new one. But what we thought about public input was, where do we want the public input to happen? Do we want it on an application by application basis? So when a developer comes in with a housing application, do we want for the single application on this lot to be held up with a public hearing, or do we want to write all the rules in advance? And this is that phrase, as of right, and develop rules that are as of right. I know, again, Austin has done a lot of that. We legalized housing 100% as of right. There are no public hearings for housing in that city. And that, too, came through advocacy and through the Planning and Zoning Commission that was very, very progressive, I think, because we all pulled each other along. So just to look nationally at how that works, in the Zoning Atlas, we are logging this as of right permission level. And so that, because we view a code that is well written, that where public is engaged with the writing of the rules, and then allows developers to come in with applications later to be among a good strategy. Again, good for government, good for process, good for the experts that I think you and I both agree are needed to inform these processes, and good for the people who need the housing, most importantly. When you look in the context of the whole country, we have a few metros that I would say are similar to some of the Texas metros that are already up on the map fully. So Phoenix is one of those, and Denver is one of those. If you look at the Denver area, well over 90% of land in the Denver metro area requires a 2-acre minimum lot size for residential housing. That's a statistic that we would have never guessed before, but that we were able to extract from reading thousands of pages of zoning codes in the Denver metro. We look at, I wrote down a couple of examples, Phoenix, across the Phoenix metro. Arizona, also a fast-growing state. In Phoenix, and the mayor there cited the National Zoning Atlas in Phoenix and said, hey, suburbs, you've got to step up, because in the suburbs, very little land's devoted to multifamily housing, to the point where region-wide, it's 5% of the whole region allows for multifamily housing as of right. The vast majority of that in Phoenix itself. So one of the differences that we might be seeing in Texas is that there's more permissiveness more broadly in the suburbs as well as in the central cities. But comparing those to some of the metros up on the map, you can, again, deal with the stats or look at the stats through our snapshots. But those are a couple that kind of came to mind. By contrast, Connecticut, where the first zoning atlas was built, 91% of the state's land allows for single-family housing as of right. 2% allows for multifamily housing as of right. So that's, Boston, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, these New England states are very similar in that regard. But again, it shows the contrast with Texas, which I think is illuminating, and one that you only get when you read all these zoning codes.
All the paper cuts were worth it, huh? Fantastic. Felicity, I'd like to hear about specific bills you see happening in Texas and across the country that will address affordable housing, and what you think of those and what Texas might adopt from other places in the country.
Yeah, it's a super exciting time to be in Texas housing policy, because in addition to the great work we're seeing at the city level, we're now seeing a real interest at the state level as well, and I've been super excited to sort of help with those conversations, because I think your point is well taken, Joel, that we're seeing certain things kind of catch hold. One of those is definitely minimum lot sizes, which we've talked about. There's a bill at the Texas legislature this year related to minimum lot sizes for bigger suburban type development, so it's greenfield as we call it, and that would allow lot sizes to go as small as 1,400 square feet. But what we're really talking about there is having a variety of sizes of housing in the same community. And guess what? Builders say that sells better, because grandmas want to live around the corner from their kids. They don't need the same size house as the family with 3 kids and the dog. They want a lock and leave sort of of opportunity, and they both want to go to the same swimming pool. So like we see the need for intergenerational living that works in these types of communities, and the builders want to offer that. But of course, sometimes they can't because of regulatory issues. So that's one of the big ones is a minimum lot size, and there's different varieties of this bill across the country. I think another one that we've seen pretty consistently is what we call YIGBY, or you may know Yes in God's Backyard. And the idea there is absolutely that you should let faith communities have the opportunity to build housing on their excess or underutilized land. And there's multiple ways how this can work, but particularly for struggling church communities, they may have really a lot of assets tied up in land that they can't necessarily develop very well. And so what we're trying to say there is like, hey, let's give these folks the opportunity to do an affordable housing project, to do a domestic shelter for women coming out of those situations, to sort of support their community that's mission driven. And a lot of places this also includes an affordable housing component specifically, but more generally, we know that if churches are often building these stuff, they have a specific community that they're tied to, a faith community, a group of people who value their services, and they want to sort of expand that mission, so to speak, and housing's a way to do that. So those are two key examples. There's plenty of other great ones. There's some a Texas-specific one we're very excited about related to notification and petition rights, but that's a whole very complicated thing we won't get into, but it is just exciting, I would say, to say that there are 5 or 6 really great bills at the Texas legislature, and if we pass even a couple of those, transformative in terms of the number of units and the way it'll impact housing across the state, and that's what we're here to do.
That's amazing. Natasha, what do you see happening in Austin right now? What's in the pipeline for affordable housing, and what gets you excited?
Comprehensive transit. One of the things that, to your point, ooh, we love being from Texas. I tell you, you don't even realize it. When you're home, you're just like, I'm from here. But then you go somewhere. I'm from Austin, Texas, the east side of, So that said, I'm really, to your point, excited to see the excitement bubble up to the top, and sort of terrified about what's going to happen with comprehensive transit. But with my fingers crossed and holding my breath, our equity transit-oriented development is something that I'm really excited to see get so much national attention. We also got national attention for our home housing policy, so really excited to see that on the ground. And then something moving forward that I'm anxious to see coming to fruition. So I brought an item forward for consideration. It's agricultural-centered housing development. So think working farm in the center of a housing development. And to your point, kind of in my mind, I call it rogue zoning. So you name the housing type. Now, whether or not this will happen, but I can dream. You think of the housing type. So like there's this pre-insulated, prefabricated house. It's 350 square feet. You need 4 people, 4 hours, and an Allen wrench to put it together. This big giant clink, 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 clink. You have a plug-in house, and somebody can live in that. You can have trailers. You can have manufactured homes. You could have multifamily. You can have single family, whatever you want. Just rogue zoning in this particular area, this designated area, to see how it works. If for no other reason, because we are so deeply invested in our innovative tendencies, and because some of our capital is in our humans, why don't we try it and pilot it and see if it works? And so I think we're willing to try new things. One thing I want to make sure that we don't do, I hate to bring up bad news, but like this festival happening successfully again this year triggered something for me when I remembered when we had to teeter on the edge of canceling South by because of COVID-19. But when I was thinking that, I was thinking we got to take away some of the things that we learned when we had to start getting really innovative and when we really had to figure out how to fix things. We recognized that there were things that we could have done preemptively. When we didn't have masks, when we knew that there was a pandemic coming and the city of Austin was scrambling to have furniture manufacturers use their leftover materials to make masks, it just really shook me to my core. I never want to find ourselves flat-footed again. So I want to make certain that, when we're laying things down on the ground right now, we're recognizing future possibilities, around limitations, and just really going for it and maximizing all the opportunities. Listen, we are not worthy, Hartford. Did you say no public testimony on zoning?
No, why
When
do you
people
need them?
ask me what's the most surprising thing about the job, I really, I came in eyes wide open. I was ready to change the world. And one of my friends who served on the council at the time, she said, "What do you plan to do?" And I hand her 3 pages of policy. She goes, "Ha! Okay, so rip up 2.5 of those pages. Let's just start there." She said, "Pick 5 things, and you're lucky if you do 3." And she was not wrong. The way that municipal policy actually moves, the glacial speed, it is slow, but I also recognize it's slow on purpose. You have to be pretty deliberate when you're implementing policy that exists in perpetuity. I mean, sometimes I actually think we might need a process for letting more professional people determine decisions about 100-year transit infrastructure. I'm not a civil engineer. I should not be making this decision. You guys know I shouldn't be making this decision, right? We're so fortunate, though, that we do have professional staffers who know what we don't know. We can't be experts at all things. I'll get back to the original point. The original point is we really have to be open to trying everything and not be afraid to use our floodplain land for agriculture and not be afraid to just open the doors wide open to, sustenance-related urban food production. Y'all, one of my farmer friends said, "Get ready to pay $12 for an avocado," and she's not an alarmist, and I'm not kidding. She is very, very concerned about food production scarcity, distribution scarcity. And if I see one more meme that says how expensive eggs are, but not see one of my neighbors start to construct a coop, I got questions. So I think just generally speaking, the paradigm shift that's gonna approach us is gonna be in large part built in resilience for our constituency, but also being prepared. We're not gonna get caught flat-footed when we have some pretty dynamic shifts in how we do things. But I don't know about y'all, I think it's about damn time we have some shifts. We've been messing it up for a long time in a lot of ways. Nothing wrong with doing it wrong long enough to recognize you can stop. Know when to fold them and get it right. And I think we're well on our way.
I want to totally +1 everything that you said, and also just add. So we did it unanimously in one night, by the way. That overhaul.
I'm so jealous.
It's that was very great. But what you said about food is so important. We are talking today about housing production and Let America Build, and all of that is really important. But zoning has impacts far beyond how much housing you can build. It has impacts on our food security, transportation security, quality of life, well-being, the beauty in our communities, and more. And so that interconnectedness, and in Hartford we did a huge thing, actually drawing from Boston's model, an urban agricultural zoning. And we did that with their Food Policy Commission. Again, like housing is so important, how much we build, that's what the zoning atlas is about. But the zoning is very multifaceted. I actually wrote a book on zoning called Key to the City. It just came out a few months ago. And I devoted 1 chapter to housing, 1 chapter to food production, not just urban agriculture, but also in rural areas, CAFOs, commercial agriculture feeding operations, and transit. So when you said that, I'm like, yes, I have to emphasize this point, is that zoning and our land use rules and our local policies, and of course state and federal too, but local policies, zoning dictates so much. It dictates whether we will have food in the future, and people don't realize that, and that's the other, just let's wake up to that.
And I'm going to jump in here with just one other example, because that is literally my mantra, which is zoning is not just about housing. It's never just about housing. It's how we build and interact with our cities, and we have to be better and smarter about how we do it. And I want to highlight something that we did in Austin that I still love holding up, because it's not about housing, it's about daycare, which is one of the hardest things to do. We literally made it possible to build a daycare at like 90% of our city, and that was good work done by one council member who came in with a bee in her bonnet saying, why can't I get more daycares in my district? It was because of zoning. So we did that before we did any other housing work, and literally the map was like night and day. It was like you could go from 1/3 of the city to like almost the entire city of building daycare centers, which are such a critical need for our families, for our people who live here, and particularly coming out of COVID, it was something that was in short supply. So like the idea that we can just do zoning around housing, no, we need to be doing zoning reform on every aspect of our cities so that we can have resilient and better cities over time.
I see Joel trying to be the Sandman and take his hook and get his panel back. But if I may add one more thing, because we haven't spoken to the commercial component. No. Small businesses are the fabric of our society, and folks who cannot afford brick and mortar, do you know there are commercial establishments in this town that are like Tokyo prices? $46 a square foot plus triple net for a barely habitable building. How can any small business in this economic climate afford that? They can't. And so, Sharon, our chief of staff in the District 1 office, she is running fast towards what she's calling small scale retail, smaller scale, smaller footprint retail opportunities. But zoning and affordability absolutely dictate our commercial interactions. But for what it's worth, I have in my district 2 historically relevant blocks, 111th, 112th. 11th Street is jumping right now because of South by. People are walking up and down the block. It's pedestrian friendly. Then I have 12th. That's adjacent to my block, and I think I have a constituent here who said she lives off of 12th too. There's tumbleweeds blowing up and down the block right now because nothing's happening. There's no food, there's no commerce, there's no nada. And so my neighbors and myself, we leave our community to get stuff. I got to drive to Hancock or to Mueller to go to the grocery store because my 7th and Pleasant Valley grocery store is trash. And sorry, HEB, I love y'all in every other way, but let's revisit that one. That said, we have to think about commerce too because it's critical and important. And to your point about daycare, affordability, when it comes down to it, affordability all comes back to, and I'll be honest, one of my missions in this life is transcendence of cycles of poverty. But what it all comes down to is that people don't make enough money. Period. That's it. We don't have enough subsidies. We won't have enough subsidies. There aren't enough subsidies. And in a city where 54% of our population are renters, and our singular focus more often than not when we're doing 12 hours of deliberation about zoning is not about renters, it's about homeowners. And we never have the conversation with our renter population where people are told that owning a home is the way, the path towards the American dream. Nobody ever said that's a setup. If you don't have the financial runway for your AC to go out or something to flood or a roof to get busted, that's a setup. Foreclosure just waiting to happen. Don't do it. Like having real conversations with people. I try to say for every sign that we have that says we buy ugly houses, we need a sign that says don't you dare sell your ugly house until you talk to. Because if we have all this talent, if we have all these professionals who know these wonky, obscure facts, they can help you determine, one, whether or not you're so underwater it's time to get the flip out of there before things are really bad for you financially. And do that in a way that you're advocating for yourself as opposed to being a victim of displacement. You are preempting displacement by recognizing you're going to be underwater in this house by way of what your taxes are going to look like moving forward. You can't afford the repairs. You can't. When you know what you know, then you can advocate for yourself successfully. When it's time to sell, somebody's not going to sell you a fraction of what your property is worth if you have people advocating for you. If right next to that We Buy Ugly Houses sign, there's a sign for a place that we established where real estate professionals, zoning professionals, and policymakers can hear the folks out, give them some legal representation. I think more people, I hear sometimes, I never would have left had I known I'd never be able to come back. I think a lot more people would stay where they are and stay put if they had the ability to do so, if we invested in doing that. Thank you.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, thank you so much. My last question for y'all was, what do you see the role of zoning outside of just building homes? And I think we've answered that really well. We got that.
We covered it.
So I'll go to some questions from the audience. First is for Sarah. Do you see a correlation between the number of pages of zoning regulation and the cost of building in that area? I think the question here is more complex regulation lead to higher building costs?
So that's a great question. As I said, we've read through hundreds of thousands of pages of zoning codes. The average code in the country is 139 pages. In Denver and Phoenix metros, the average number of pages is over 250. DFW is the only Texas metro with over 139-page average. The others that I mentioned, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, are about 110 pages per jurisdiction. So if you think of zoning codes as a proxy, pages as a proxy for amount of regulation, I think you do see some correlations between the ability of somebody to build something efficiently and the number of pages of zoning codes. I've written a report for the city of Boston a couple of years ago. The Boston code is over 3,500 pages. New York City's code is also a couple thousand pages. Boston, by the way, is 42 square miles smaller than your district. So just, again, as a proxy for regulatory complexity, yes, number of pages is that. And you can actually see the number of pages that we've read using our snapshots feature, which is at zoningatlas.org/snapshots for every jurisdiction that we've done.
Fantastic. For Felicity, a question here. Could you speak to what Texas and Austin are doing well to build inventory at all ends of the property ladder? I think at different price points is the question here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think that's a great way to think of it because we should absolutely view housing as a spectrum. We have folks who are at the lower end of income and they do need financial subsidies to basically, and you know, that's okay. That might be a person who's a disability on fixed income, whatever the case may be, but those folks will never be supported by market rents, so they just don't have the income or ability to do that. So we need folks that are supported at the very bottom, or say lower end of our spectrum, all the way up to, you know, well over medium earners. And I think one of the interesting things that happened in Austin is that folks who came to Austin to like have these great tech jobs felt priced out of the market. And like when the market doesn't seem responsive to individuals who are making quite a lot of money, that's when you really get this, I think, we're dysfunctional sort of situation. And so, yes, to answer your question, we've absolutely seen an increase in rent in units across the board. I think we're particularly excited to see with Home 1 and Home 2, those first units that are infill units, as we would call, coming in. You know, I had the opportunity to tour one of the first set of Home 1 houses that were built pretty much in 9 months, which is fantastic for a standard build. And those are smaller. They tend to be probably 1,600 to 1,800 square feet. They are in our core neighborhoods. They have a smaller footprint. And they're really designed for that smaller family unit. Great. Guess what? The price point is smaller too. And so when you are that young professional who maybe isn't making, you know, big tech money, like, you know, the 150 level, you can suddenly look at these houses and say, hey, this works for us. This works for our budget. This works for our needs. We're near great schools. We're part of a community. We can still walk to a bar if that's something you want to do. So like that feels like a real change in Austin. Not only the support that we've increased for our lower income folks, but also the ability to deliver market solutions for people who are not at the top end of the earning spectrum. I think that's really been a big change.
Absolutely, and huge for mobility across that
absolutely.
ladder. 100%. One last question, I think. Will zoning be influenced by climate change, or
Yes.
when will it be influenced?
Yes, 100%. That is such an important question. I'm glad we got to it at the end because we didn't get a chance to talk about it. Our work is unlocking unprecedented research on where we are locating housing in areas that are subject to climate change impacts. And so we're doing a project with the Regional Plan Association in the New York City metro area. You've got Long Island Sound. You've got all of Lower Manhattan going to be flooded in the coming years. And yet that's where we're putting multifamily housing is areas where at Coney Island that are prone to risk. We just released a report with the Urban Institute in Mobile, Alabama, and looking at those areas that will be flooding and are prone to floods. And what we are doing with zoning at the local level does not at all correspond to a climate response. I do think that is going to be a huge concern, should be a huge concern for local policymakers now. And we're hoping that our research really pushes local governments to say, are we putting stuff where we shouldn't? Maybe we shouldn't do that. But then it comes back to the hard questions and the disputes and the public involvement in those hard decisions that have to be made by decision makers, just like our good councilwoman here, and how you say, well, you really shouldn't be living here anymore. Well, we're going to zone this to be restricted conservation land. You can't build anything here. Who do they get compensated for that? Is that a takings issue? Is it a property rights issue? And so we are going to have to make these decisions, which is why probably in some ways, and I know Felicity would support this, some of the decisions have to be made at the state level so that we have better policy at these local levels, because there's so many local governments doing so many different things. And as a community, as a society, as a country, we really do need to harmonize, really in the case of climate change, life-saving and ultimately property-saving goals with the rules on the ground, and that's where zoning really does come in.
Absolutely. Sounds like zoning is really, something that can get in the way, but also has a role. And so I think a balance is really what's important here, and I think that's where we landed on this panel today. Well, thank you for everyone coming today. If you asked a question that didn't make it to my iPad, we'll be hanging around for a happy hour. So come and find our lovely panelists and ask them your questions yourself. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our panelists.